Mercedes may have just triggered the biggest internal crisis Formula One has seen all season. George Russell was leading the Canadian Grand Prix. Mercedes had the fastest car on the grid. The championship fight was finally alive again. Then suddenly, the entire car shut down. At full speed. No electronics. No braking support. No recovery. And now the FIA is investigating what really happened behind the most shocking Mercedes failure of 2026. But here's where this story becomes explosive. Because according to Russell himself, the car was already making strange noises before everything died completely. That single detail has created massive tension inside the Mercedes garage. Why? Because insiders now believe the failure may be connected to the MG UK electrical system, the exact area Mercedes pushed harder than almost anyone under Formula One's brutal new regulations. More power. More aggressive deployment. More stress on the system. And Canada may have exposed the hidden cost of Mercedes chasing total domination. The timing could not be worse. Russell was fighting Antonelli in one of the most intense teammate battles of the entire season. For lead changes. Aggressive defending. Massive championship pressure. Even Toto Wolff looked visibly tense on the pit wall while both drivers pushed the cars to the limit. Then came the blackout. And now, instead of celebrating another dominant victory, Mercedes is facing dangerous questions from every direction. Did the team ignore warning signs? Did the upgrades push the power unit too close to failure? And is the growing war between Russell and Antonelli already starting to break the team apart from inside? Because beneath Antonelli's fifth consecutive win, something inside Mercedes suddenly looks unstable. The reliability. The pressure. The trust. And if the FIA discovers Mercedes crossed technical limits while chasing performance, Canada may become the race that changed the entire Formula One season forever. From the outside, Mercedes looked completely untouchable in Canada. That's what made the failure so shocking. The W17 was dominating almost every important part of the weekend. Qualifying pace, race pace, tire management, launch performance. Everything looked perfect. And honestly, George Russell may have been driving the best weekend of his entire career. He took pole position for the sprint race, won the sprint, then grabbed pole position again for the Grand Prix itself. That matters because for most of the season, the spotlight inside Mercedes had belonged to Kimi Antonelli. For straight victories, massive momentum, growing confidence with every race, people inside the paddock were already starting to whisper something dangerous for Russell. That Antonelli was becoming the future of Mercedes faster than expected. But Canada suddenly changed the balance. Because for the first time in months, Russell looked stronger, sharper, more aggressive. And from the opening lap, you could feel how much this race meant to him. His start from pole position was almost flawless. Mercedes had quietly worked on fixing their launch system after earlier struggles this season, and in Montreal the improvement was immediate. Russell exploded off the line and instantly controlled the first corner. Antonelli followed behind in second place. Then something happened that probably scared the rest of Formula One more than anything else. The two Mercedes cars started pulling away from everyone. Fast. Within only a few laps, it became obvious that Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull simply could not match the pace. That is usually the moment dominant teams start relaxing. But Mercedes did not look relaxed at all. Because the real danger was already developing inside the garage. Russell and Antonelli were not driving like teammates anymore. They were driving like rivals. The lead changed multiple times during the opening phase of the race. Antonelli attacked aggressively with DRS. Russell defended brutally into the chicanes. Every lap increased the tension. And eventually, even the radios started reflecting it. Antonelli complained that Russell was using the entire width of the track and leaving him no space. Now normally, radio complaints like that are not unusual in Formula One. But this situation felt different. Because both drivers understood exactly what was at stake. If Russell won in Canada, the championship fight suddenly became alive again. If Antonelli won a fifth consecutive race, his control over the season would become enormous. And Toto Wolff knew it. The cameras kept cutting back to the Mercedes pit wall throughout the race. Wolff barely reacted. He stayed focused on the telemetry screens while both drivers pushed harder and harder. That image became incredibly important later. Because now, after the FIA investigation began, many people started wondering whether Mercedes already knew the cars were operating near dangerous limits. And honestly, the timing makes those questions impossible to ignore. The new 2026 regulations transformed Formula One completely. The electrical systems inside the cars became dramatically more powerful than previous generations. That means more performance, but also much more stress. Think about running a laptop at maximum brightness while playing the heaviest game possible for hours. Eventually, heat becomes a serious problem. That is basically what Formula One teams are dealing with now, except at more than 200 miles per hour. And Mercedes pushed those systems harder than almost anyone else this season. The upgrades brought to Canada made the car significantly faster. Better balance, better acceleration, better traction through the chicanes. Everything worked. Maybe too well. Because while Russell and Antonelli fought at qualifying intensity lap after lap, the stress on the power systems kept increasing. More deployment, more electrical load, more heat. Then came the detail that changed the entire story after the race. Russell admitted he had heard strange noises from the car before the total shutdown happened. At the time, he ignored them. Drivers do that constantly in Formula One. But after the retirement, those noises suddenly became one of the most important clues in the entire investigation. Because now the FIA is trying to determine whether Mercedes simply suffered bad luck, or whether the team pushed the West 17 dangerously close to failure while chasing total domination. The moment George Russell stopped on track, the entire mood inside Mercedes changed instantly. Not disappointment. Fear. Because everyone inside that garage understood something immediately. This was not a normal mechanical failure. Russell's car did not slowly lose pace. The tires did not collapse. The engine did not explode dramatically. The entire system simply died. And in modern Formula One, that is one of the most dangerous types of failures possible. Russell later described it in brutally simple words. Everything just switched off. No electronics. No regenerative braking. No hybrid deployment. Nothing. Imagine driving through a tunnel at full speed and suddenly every light disappears while the steering becomes heavy at the exact same moment. That is essentially what Russell experienced entering turn 9. And the timing made the situation even more alarming. Because the failure happened in one of the highest energy demand sections of the entire circuit. That detail matters enormously. The new 2026 regulations force teams to depend far more heavily on electrical deployment systems than ever before. The MG UK unit now generates nearly 3 times the power compared to older Formula One cars. 3 times. That is not evolution. That is a complete transformation of how these cars operate. More electrical deployment means more performance under acceleration. But it also creates extreme temperatures and massive stress inside the power systems. And according to reports after the race, Mercedes suspects the issue may have originated in the inverter connected to that MG UK system. Now for casual fans, the inverter sounds invisible. But inside Formula One, it is absolutely critical. Think of it like the main electrical translator inside the car. Without it, the stored energy cannot properly convert into usable power. If it suddenly fails, everything connected to the hybrid system collapses instantly. Which perfectly matches what happened to Russell. And this is where the FIA investigation suddenly became extremely serious. Because investigators now have access to all the telemetry data from the shutdown itself. Every voltage spike. Every temperature reading. Every unusual signal before the blackout. And according to people inside the paddock, the FIA is now trying to determine whether Mercedes simply suffered an unavoidable mechanical failure. Or whether the team pushed the system beyond safe operating margins while chasing maximum performance. That distinction changes everything. Because Formula One teams constantly operate near the edge. That part is normal. But when a dominant team suddenly experiences a catastrophic electrical failure under brand new regulations, scrutiny increases immediately. Especially when the same team has been gaining huge performance advantages from those systems all season. The upgrades Mercedes brought to Canada worked almost perfectly before the retirement happened. Better balance through the chicanes. Faster launches. More stable handling. The car looked untouchable. But now rival teams are asking the question Mercedes hoped nobody would ask. How hard were they really pushing the power unit? And that pressure is becoming political now, not just technical. Because the moment one team appears too dominant in Formula One, the rest of the grid starts looking for weaknesses everywhere. Ferrari wants answers. Red Bull wants answers. McLaren wants answers. And meanwhile, Mercedes is trying to avoid internal panic. Because reliability failures create psychological damage faster than people realize. Engineers start becoming more conservative. Drivers stop trusting the car completely. Every strange sound suddenly feels dangerous. And George Russell already experienced that fear directly in Canada. Remember, he admitted after the race that he had heard unusual noises before the shutdown happened. That detail now feels massive. Because if those noises were early warning signs, then the next question becomes brutal. Did Mercedes know the systems were under dangerous stress before the failure happened? That is exactly why the FIA investigation suddenly carries so much tension around it. Because if the governing body discovers Mercedes ignored warning signs while aggressively chasing performance gains, the fallout could become enormous. Not just for the team, for the entire championship. And internally, the timing could not be worse. Antonelli just secured his 5th consecutive victory. Russell just lost huge championship points through no mistake of his own. And now both drivers enter the next phase of the season with completely different emotional states. Antonelli feels unstoppable. Russell feels robbed. That combination inside one dominant garage can become explosive very quickly. And this is the point where Mercedes faces the problem every dominant Formula One team eventually fears. Not the pressure from rival teams. Pressure from inside. Because after Canada, the entire emotional balance inside Mercedes may have changed permanently. Think about the position George Russell is in right now. He delivered one of the strongest weekends of his career. Pole position. Sprint victory. Leading the Grand Prix. Then the car failed underneath him while he was fighting for the championship. Drivers never forget moments like that. Especially when the teammate on the other side of the garage benefits from it completely. And that is exactly what happened with Antonelli. The moment Russell retired, Antonelli inherited control of the race and never looked back. Mercedes managed the strategy calmly, protected the tires, and secured another victory without major pressure from behind. From the outside, it looked smooth. Inside the garage, it probably felt very different. Because now the championship gap has exploded to 43 points. That number changes everything psychologically. A small gap creates hope. A massive gap creates desperation. And Russell himself sounded emotionally exhausted after the race. He openly admitted it feels like the championship now belongs to Antonelli unless something dramatic changes later in the season. That statement may become one of the defining moments of 2026. Because once a driver mentally shifts from protecting a title fight to attacking with nothing left to lose, the danger level rises immediately. Russell even admitted the pressure is now gone and that he plans to fight aggressively for victories moving forward. That sounds simple. But inside Formula One, that changes the dynamic of an entire team. Because Mercedes now faces two completely different emotional forces at the same time. Antonelli is calm, confident, and leading the championship comfortably. Russell is frustrated, wounded, and suddenly free from the pressure of defending points. That combination can become explosive. Especially in a team already dealing with reliability fears and FIA scrutiny. And here's the detail most people still underestimate. Mercedes may now be forced to choose between performance and safety. That is the hidden consequence of Canada. If the FIA investigation confirms the power systems were operating dangerously close to their limits, Mercedes will almost certainly need to adjust something. Maybe cooling. Maybe deployment settings. Maybe race management strategies. But every small reduction in aggression costs performance. And Formula One teams hate sacrificing speed once they know they have the fastest car. That creates internal conflict immediately. Because what happens if Antonelli wants maximum attack mode to continue dominating races? But Russell wants safer settings after experiencing a total shutdown while leading? Now suddenly, both drivers may want completely different things from the same car. And that creates political tension inside the garage very quickly. Especially when one driver is becoming the future face of the team. Antonelli's rise now feels impossible to stop. 5 consecutive victories. Huge championship lead. And total confidence over the radio after Canada. Kimi Antonelli, world champion. That line sounded emotional in the moment. But inside Mercedes, it probably carried much more weight than people realize. Because Formula One teams naturally start building around momentum. Around confidence. Around the driver who feels unstoppable. And if Russell begins feeling the team is shifting emotionally toward Antonelli, the tension could become far worse than anything we have seen publicly so far. That is how dominant teams slowly become unstable. Not through one massive argument. Through tiny emotional fractures that grow over time. One driver loses trust in reliability. One side of the garage feels favored. One investigation creates external pressure. And eventually, every race weekend starts carrying hidden tension underneath the surface. Canada already exposed signs of that. The aggressive defending. The frustrated radio messages. The frozen expression from Toto Wolff on the pit wall. Those moments suddenly feel much more important now. Because if Mercedes experiences another major failure later this season, everything inside the team could escalate very quickly. The trust. The politics. The championship fight itself. And the terrifying part for Mercedes is this. The W17 is still probably the fastest car in Formula One. which means the biggest threat to their season may no longer come from Ferrari, Red Bull, or McLaren. It may come from the pressure building inside Mercedes itself.